And
Yeah, they're
roots are completely
They
lost.
want to Oregon.
Jamie did,
But
Yeah, that works.
some another CV.
such a big part of life.
Yeah, I mean, the system seems good in that, you at least have a possibility.
Well, and then it's
Scale it back.
most of us, we want some published papers. So if you can get the high ones, high ones.
You're original.
Yeah.
Not Eugene, but yeah. Yes, but so my parents still live there. It's like just great.
Is that today or?
I haven't.
Okay. No, although, well, yes, technically, but I might have gotten an email that I archived this.
Apparently, we're pretty sure, but yeah.
I got to do work for the first time.
Yeah, that's great. But you're not that many names.
You're doing
It's a nice dog that they have.
I mean,
The 5-year horizon is bad.
because we're, you don't do that, cross the bridge. You're gonna rent this thing. Yeah, yeah. You can just store the house. It's fair. I think it's fair to go and reach for and ISD on being in order to get on it. The second one.
got me. So then I was like, what's the thing I want to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Like, yeah.
It's also for me, like, I want to do. In the space for. And then another month, I don't have it, and so.
I think every 2 years.
And do you have a?
I don't know, but previously it's in the building. You know, like, it's our body. And it's dog.
Yeah.
And this one.
Like.
The bridge.
Yeah.
The guys that-
Luckily, there was, yeah, luckily there are some new buildings. Good renovation.
Whoops. Found the right move. Oh, there's 6 people there yet.
Okay. Okay, why don't we get started? It's my distinct pleasure, one, to be back here in IE squared and see the new and old faces. And to introduce Walter Dodds as today's speaker. He's presently the Edwin G. Lillian and, Edwin G. and Lillian J. Burkata Chair in Biology and a distinguished professor at Kansas State University. And he's been there a while, since 1990. But before that, he actually got his PhD in the Department of Biology here with Dick Kastenholz as his advisor. In a review of IE squared, I looked at sort of the metrics when I was director of it, of all the faculty and their H scores, and Dick was way above everybody else. Walter is an ecosystem aquatic ecologist with a focus on water quality and conservation. He is the co-author of a textbook, Freshwater Ecology and Concepts and Environmental Applications of Limnology, and it's in its 3rd edition. He's written 3 other books, The World's Worst Problems in 2019, published by Springer, Laws, Theories, and Patterns in Ecology, published in 2009 by the University of California Press, and Humanity's Footprint, Momentum, Impact, and Our Global Environment, published in 2008 with the University of Columbia Press. And he's a busy person, so he's published 220 peer-reviewed articles so far, and 4 book chapters. So, and he's working on a synthesis of macrosystem, part of the macrosystem program through ecology, on riparian habitats, and excited to hear about that today.
Thanks a lot, Scott. So I was a TA in developmental biology in this classroom in 1984. It's kind of fun. All right. Everybody hear us okay? There I am. All right. Okay, so today I'm basically, the point of my sabbatical is to work on this idea of how riparian zones and functions might vary with biomes that they're embedded in. And so just throwing some ideas out, and I'm going to be talking about a lot of work I've done at Konza Prairie Biological Station, which is a tallgrass prairie LTR site in Kansas. And this image from 1986, you can see there's one of our weirs here. We've got 30+ years of data on chemistry and discharge. And then 20 years later, you can see how the riparian zone is becoming more tree-y. So that'll be part of the things that I'm talking about today. Not wanting to advance. There we go. So there were a number of tribes that inhabited Konza, including the Kaw, who were driven from the Midwest into Kansas, and the Osage and the Kickapoo and the Sioux. And I need to acknowledge that, and also that being in a land grant institution, basically those were founded based on selling off native lands. So it's a little bit of embarrassment there. I'm going to talk about a lot of different research projects here, and so I have a lot of collaborators. I'll bring them up when I get there. And then there was a large project that used a lot of whole watershed wood removal that used a lot of volunteer help. Nature Conservancy, Department of Conservation of Missouri, National Science Foundation, and then my university funded me too. So all of those things I'm grateful for. I'm going to talk about the importance of riparian zones, then applying a terrestrial biome concept to riparian zones, and give some examples. Woody versus grassy riparian zones, how ungulate grazers interact with shifts towards riparian zones, and whole watershed effects. So we probably all know that riparian zones are at the interface between terrestrial and aquatic. They tend to be wetter, they tend to have more nutrients. And they perform really important key ecosystem services, including filtering and transforming pollutants. And those would be sediments, nutrients, and organic materials. There can be much unique biodiversity associated with riparian zones, particularly in drier habitats. They can alter the carbon flux as well through allochthonous and autochthonous inputs. Basically, where there's light coming in, you can have primary production, and otherwise leaves. So this is some work that my master's student, Bob Oakes, did a number of years ago now. And it demonstrated how riparian zones, and particularly those in small streams, have a disproportionate effect on water, downstream water quality. And so the one on A is essentially all of the riparian zones in a watershed. And then in this study, all of the watersheds we looked at were at fourth order streams, right? So down here, and then this next smaller stream would be the third order and second order, then first order streams being the very smallest ones. And looked at riparian cover for 2 kilometers and 4 kilometers upstream and the fourth order site, and then also parsed out within the watershed. So basically just did a bunch of regressions, and not to worry so much about the significance, but on the y-axis is the proportion of variance that's explained by what's in either the whole watershed or the first order stream riparian or the 2 or 4 kilometers upstream from the fourth order site. Okay, so it's right there where you're sampling basically, and a little bit up, or the first order streams. And what we see, and you can't see this really well because it's covered. There we'll put it up there. So total nitrogen, nitrate, ammonium, phosphorus, atrazine, coliforms, and oxygen. And for the most part, what's happening in the watershed in the first order stream is the most important. And the first order streams really explain one of the variants in these potential pollutants than what's going on right where you're sampling. And then if we just look at the riparian zone in the whole watershed and just the riparian zone in the first order stream, again, they explain very similar amounts of variance. So this ended up being useful in that the seasonal part's not up here, but we are in Kansas. It's an area where in August and this time of year, the streams aren't flowing, it's quite dry. And we broke it up into seasons. Even when the upstream streams were not flowing, there's still what was going on in those riparian zones out there was the most important predictor of what was happening. So they're really important. And there is a significant nexus between the riparian zones of small intermittent streams and the water flowing downstream, regardless of what this is pretty important to this rule. Yeah, no, if you don't laugh, you're gonna cry. And so these were 57 watersheds. And we see the percent variance flowing in water chemistry. Again, just the whole watershed uncovered in first order streams. It's really daunting what's happening. I'm just trying to convince you that riparian zones are important. And then we can do things here, like we can get correlations with a bunch of different sites throughout the central United States here, and a percent riparian cropland as a function of nitrate in this particular case. We can see that the different streams have different responses to the proportion of cropland that's in them. This is starting to suggest that different biomes might have different elements associated with riparian. So We also use this to basically extrapolate these lines back and to get the native, native conditions without cropland and get an idea of what baseline nutrition should be. I'm contrast this with Rio de Janeiro state over here on the right-hand side. And this, very rapidly as you add right urban zones in the riparian zone, it just shoots the phosphorus concentration way up. So these relationships on the left are for United States, probably Europe, so you can see that kind of thing. Maybe in some of these tropical areas, less developed countries, you might see different effects. This particularly because of the steep topography, people build their homes at the bottom of the streams, near the streams, near the coast. And they don't treat their sewage, and there's no phosphorus. So you don't need much before you really just start working about it. But the riparian zone is still important. Okay, riparian zones are defined, biomes are defined based on structure and function. It's not a taxonomic construct, so we're going to keep that in mind. Incline alters the structure and function, so we ended up things like deserts, that look similar, even though the taxonomy is different in, South Africa than it is in southwestern United States. And the question that I'm going after is, does riparian function differ significantly by biome? So this is a Holdridge diagram of biomes, very crude representation of it. And we see the amount of precipitation increasing, as mean annual precipitation increasing as we go this way on this diagram, and the temperature is increasing as we go this way on this diagram. So we have rainforests over here, rainforests here in the Cascade, right up here. And what these series of papers that I did with a number of my collaborators did was take these biomes and tried to figure out how the biome and aquatic systems are in translates to the function of a stream. And what's really important, or links, what's really important here is where potential and actual transpiration and annual precipitation are equal to each other, right? So anytime you're on this side of the line, the precip goes on this side of the line here, you're going to have more water running off. But anytime you're on this side of the line, you're not going to have much runoff. So you can get things like more intermittent streams or lakes in this region of the graph, and more permanent streams in this region. Can we do anything with riparian zones related to that? So one of my hypotheses here is that we have that we can just go to the next wettest biome, if you want to think about it that way. Because it's wetter in the bottom, if we have a grassland, the margins of the stream would be more like a deciduous forest, this way. If we have a desert, you might have willows and grasses. I've heard of it. And the various streams I've worked on throughout the world sort of inform this question and got me thinking about it. So the land acknowledgements are on all of these. I gave the land acknowledgement to Kansas already. This one is Mongolia, and there's one of the few countries that actually the native, no history, native people don't live in it, so in control of the country. So we can go into Tasmania. Really, the dry eucalypt forest doesn't really change much with the structure of functions to get close to the stream until you get to the flood zone, and then it just gets knocked out. Mongolia, as I mentioned, the grazing is very intense there. There's more livestock people in that country, and so there's not really much tree or willow, but you can still see it's wetter next to the riparian zone, right? The grass is bigger near the stream, near the river there. But we can contrast this. The Salmon River is in really very similar biome, right, with mountains around the outside, but they don't have tons of others there, right? And there's woody vegetation right up here of the stream. But if you look back here on the hills behind here, it's not that different looking than well. Kansas, this is, we got a little bit of deciduous forest here, and this actually happens to be a flood where the water just by passing right through. Together right across the top of it. Let's see, Atlantic rainforest in Gila Grande and near Rio de Janeiro. Is the riparian vegetation different when you get closer? Well, maybe, there's more light coming through than the tropical rainforest, right? Similar situation in intermittent stream and the light. Is the riparian zone different, or is it good enough water there? Alaska, we're getting shrubbification, right? So if we move to Alaska, you get these willows in here because it's a little bit protected, a little bit lighter. But clearly a different riparian setup and reasons for there being what the riparian zone is here than there is say in Mongolia. And then Denmark, is very developed, and it's cropland right to the edge of the grass. So this is being more specific about the idea of how things might vary by biome in the riparian zone. And so this is based on some work by Fannin and colleagues just published in PNAS. We have groundwater in the bottom here. The capillary zone is that light blue area. And then how far the infiltration from the surface goes. And we can have these different strategies. So if you're right down next to the water, and it's always water there, it's waterlogged, it's very often, you have a very specific vegetation. Perhaps it's adapted to climate as well. If you move up, you get more seasonal waterlogging, right? So you're not always actually waterlogged. A lot of vegetation more kind of like this around here is like that. If you can get your roots down into the capillary zone, you're not ever going to be water limited, right? But as you move up, this up here, it's moving up and down. You might switch back and forth between using surface water and groundwater. It can cost more energy to pull water up, right? Water up from the down deep. And then up here in the upland is completely water. You can't access that capillary zone. When you're wetter, all this stuff compresses up. You're not going to have complete reliance on precipitation because water is never limiting, and you can have a lot more water in the system. So, one forest basically shuts down the winter water log. That's what grows. The trees don't grow much here. And then if we have a desert, the water body is here and it's losing, right? It's losing to the groundwater. The groundwater is getting deeper and deeper down. And this compresses all this stuff here to very close to the stream bed. So these are some of the ideas that I'm trying to work on and see if we can get more predictive in a global sense. And what I'm going to talk about here now is this riparian zone biome shift that we're experiencing in concept, because the other part of it is human activity. The Conservatory Biological Station, as I mentioned, is owned by the Nature Conservancy and managed by Kansas State University, and it's broken up by watersheds. And the watersheds are under different bird frequencies. They have native grazers, so all the N1s have native grazers on it. N2Bs, second replicate of protein every 2 years. Cattle on this side, again, this is pasture grazing. I'll talk a little bit about some of that. For the rotational converting of these watersheds, and watersheds with no grazers on it. And we can see between 1985 and 2010, this woody riparian vegetation is creeping up stream channels and becoming more and more prevalent. We're getting more woody vegetation, and these are basically shrubs, and then trees, ultimately becoming deciduous or forest with the next biome to the east of it. We were interested in what the effects of this were on the stream ecosystem, so we did small scale woody removal, 30 meters out on each side, 50 meters long. And then we had areas that stayed with forest in them, those that had to move, and then naturally open grassy areas. And a series of papers that came out, more light and get more altitude. Maybe not a big surprise, but take away that canopy cover, more healthy growth. The invertebrate community in the streams moves from those that are reliant upon leaves towards those that can create altitude. So you have shifts in the biological communities and how carbon is flushed into the system. I'll talk a little bit more about why denitrification increased with removal, and in the later part of the talk. And it did also have effect on the microbial community. Allison, sequence the photo of Mr. Richmond decrease. Not really sure why that is, but it was a response. So now I'm going to talk about, in addition to this, some other factors that might interact with riparian zone function and biome. And this is cattle and bison in the riparian zone. So this is a project in Osage Prairie in southwest Missouri. And it's also a patch bird grazing. So we see here riparian fencing here in this watershed. And this is actually just one animal. It could be very small pastures. And the first year is in yellow, and then the red, and then blue. And we supply the water up here. Mostly the fences kept the cattle out. The way pasture grazing works is that the part of the pasture that you just burned, the cattle move in on the high nitrogen forage. And so you can see that at the bottom of this watershed was burned the first year, the middle, the second, and the third year was burned at the top. And then this is just basically the same riparian zone, but they have a fence on it, and you can see that they've gotten streamlined, right? So they made a difference there. And this is just the main response I'll show you. Basically, we had control watersheds that had no grazing. We had fence beforehand, right? All of the watersheds are essentially controlled and ungrazed beforehand. And we had 3 years of cattle on, and they were either fenced or openly grazed throughout the riparian. And we have a significant effect of fencing and whether the cattle were there. You know, the nitrogen it made a difference. And then we're now trying to compare those bison to the cattle, because people think of cattle in Flint Hills. The Flint Hills is where 2% of the tall grass prairie is left, and almost all of that in North America, almost all of that is Flint Hills. And that's because of the shallow soils encourage cattle production rather than row crop agriculture. And burning frequently keeps the woody vegetation down. So our cattle mimics to bison that were historically there. The native larger is a question that you are asked. So in this case, we just have we're basically going to count species and what can be covered, and we had ungrazed watersheds on Kanza, bison grazed watersheds that have fairly low animal density, cow on fairly low density again on Kanza, and then we have a working ranch in the August Prairie National Reserve nearby that has high biomass of cattle. And what we see, if we look at the fecal counts, if we have low amounts of bison or cattle, there's more feces than ungrazed, obviously, right? Because there's no large animals to drop feces in. Now, elk broke in there from nearby, but that's there. But the traditional cattle have a lot more fecal counts per square meter than these other products. So there's fecal material coming in. Ground cover varied a little bit. This patch burn had fairly low ground cover because the cattle came in under the trees during the summertime and trampled out the riparian vegetation. Bison had more, and then the traditional cattle had ground cover because it was all the trees were gone. And what we see here is all 3 of these ways to manage large ungulates on these watersheds decrease the size of the sediment in the stream. So they're moving sediment from the landscape into the stream. If you don't have them on there, then the stream will have larger size sediment. So sediment can be used as fluid. So look at these areas. Some of the experiments we're doing now is looking at these areas in the riparian zone, and there might be hot spots of transporting material into the stream. And if you look carefully, you can see that this right here is a sprinkler system, and there's actually another one up above it. We're putting about 2 inches of rain on these things in 45 minutes. And then we have inert tracers, bromine tracers that can follow through here and watch it into the soil. And we're also adding in N15 labeled nitrate to look at how much of the nitrate takes it out of the system. And it turns out a lot of it ends up in the plains. And we're comparing these grassy or these vegetated riparian zones to cut banks and then alluvial that. So this is some of the data from the first paper that we got out from this method. Jess Corman came up with it in the University of Nebraska, and this is a super duper R&D project actually. And here we have the time from when the release starts. So here's when the rain was. This is gray bar here. And you can see the bromides coming up and going down. And we did a comparison. We went 68 meters downstream from this to see uptake from the stream, and it spreads out that signal. N15, we get really high levels of N15 labeled nitrate coming off right from the riparian zone. It stretches out a little bit more. So we see that the bromide, we tried how much of the bromide we can account for of the total. It's in the soil and in the water. There, how much the N15? It's not much in the soil. Most of it ends up in the grass. Some of it is downstream. This is just one we did this a couple months ago, and this is an area, bison area actually. And the bison like to be near the stream in the winter time, and we can keep bison on the land throughout the year. They're adapted to being on the land throughout the year, whereas cattle have to supplement feed them. So they're usually not on pasture, so if they are, they're getting fed. But they like this area because it's got some tree grasses around the edge, and then I guess it's a good scratchy trees. So when they start losing their winter coat, they like to run up against there and they just trash it. You can see, this is just trampled here, compacted soil, no vegetation pullback sediment. When we do the rainstorm, here's our bromide here, and then we get a whole lot of sediment. This total suspended solids down here, that's actually not zero. It's just so low relative to the amount that's coming into the stream. And we did this further precipitation simulation. So I think now we get to a position where we've got to figure out on landscape scale, if we scale up to these whole watersheds, how are the hot spots interacting with large amounts of grazers for the geothermal system. So we could have a 99% impact riparian zone and 1% impacted, maybe that would be a big effect. So the undead grazers are interacting with the vegetation instead. Another thing we've got going on out of Kansas is long-term decreases in discharge. And so this is 5-year running mean discharge at the bottom of the site, basically, of the stream, Kings Creek. And we can see that there's this decrease between 1985 and the present of the discharge. And then this is the long-term, the 5-year running median. So when the average, when the stream's dry more than a year than it's wet, then that median becomes 0. Right, so basically we're increasing the air levels of this stream. We're having longer and longer periods of complete dryness in the stream. And we're interested in what is going on here, and part of the hypothesis is that the woody expansion that I showed you earlier is sucking water out of the system, because trees have deeper roots and shrubs have deeper roots, and they can move more water up out of the system. They have about 2 times the rate of evaporation as grasses that rely just on surface water. So we did a whole watershed woody removal experiment and trying to figure out if we can reverse these trends with active management and also look for other ecosystem shifts. This is a whole watershed removal for 10 years. We removed all the woody vegetation over 4.8 kilometers of stream channel in this watershed, 30 meters on each side of the main channel, 10 meters on the small side. We recut it every 2 years, and we burned it. And we have basically this is before after control impact. Here's the treatment watershed, a 2-year burn, the white being the 30-meter and the blue being the 10-meter white removal cutting. And then the 4-year burn and an annually burned watershed. All these are native grid. And we can see from our handy dandy Google Earth image, before we cut, you can't even see the stream channel. There's a lot of wood there. And then 2 years after we cut, and 10 years after we cut, you can see the open stream channel there. So we did open up the canopy. And then there's a side channel that wasn't in the experimental area. You can see it still remains covered up. This paper just came out in ecological application. So Zach Radisak did remote sensing and ground truthing to get at what the vegetative cover was. And this is the treatment watershed. The year of cutting started is here on this arrow. And these are the two control watersheds that were not cut. And we see that the proportion of shrub cover is expanding. Riparian shrub cover is expanding exponentially. It sort of drops and then it just takes off. Right? In upland, it's also expanding. Tree cover, I'm going to cut a bunch of trees and it's gone, and it takes a long time to get back. But at that part, I guess success. Not much trees upland. Total area, though, if you take the shrub response here and compare it to the tree response, we see that even though we cut every 2 years for 10 years, the actual total cover stayed about the same. Okay. So this is a really big failed experiment. So a lot of work. And what happened was is the shrubs basically could resprout, and we were cutting in the winter time because we didn't want to disturb the soil, but maybe should have realized that when we do that, you're basically all the nutrients are down in the roots, right? They translate all the nutrients down, and then they just sprout out. So we have, and we don't see this, we don't see the same thing, but we do see exponential increases in woody vegetation, both trees and the riparian zones, and essentially all of those ones. We had a huge nitrogen pulse that came off of this. So this is a log scale, and the removal years are starting with 210 up to the end of this here. And this is a lot. So this is like what, 8 or something like that micrograms nitrate per liter. Really low nitrogen. And then we're up to 200 micrograms. So a huge flush of nitrate coming out. Again, they're translocated down to the roots. We did kill a lot of vegetation, particularly the trees, and that nutrient had to go somewhere. I think it dumped out. That also explains why in the earlier experiments we saw denitrification going down after we made nitrogen for a bit. We don't see similar patterns in the annually burned or the 4-year burn watershed. So the nitrate the constant is higher in this one. In this one, we don't know exactly why that is, but could be the burning, but it's not there. And organic carbon is sort of drifting up in all these, but it's all organic carbon by the cutting. So that getting the leaves out of the stream channel didn't translate to organic carbon. And we have fairly good data from this, realizing that particularly the black carbon is not sensitive to burning over time. We're talking about 20 or 30 years. It's probably hundreds of thousands about that. Okay, and so then we have these long-term litter traps, and they're in the gallery forest downstream from where we did the cutting. And we see that as these riparian forests develop, we get more and more, more and more leaves and twigs and stuff falling down. And between 1980 and 2020, right? So 40 years, the amount of deposition is almost double. But bigger forests put more leaves in, right? But this is important because it drives how it works. And if you have more leaves, you're also going to have less white. And so there's an effect of this. So we went back and surveyed the stream channels, and these surveys in the stream channels. So the streams are a local spot, and then the leaves either fall in direct with it or laterally transported, wind blown or whatever. That's where they accumulate, and then eventually the water comes back, and the macrosystem together, it'll flow out the flood. So the mature forest downstream, and then just below the area that we did the removal, we see pretty similar amounts of the material building up the stream channel at the end of the fall. Where we did the removal, we moved from trees to shrubs, and the shrubs, dogwood, wild plum, have much smaller leaves. They just fall straight down, and then they break down more quickly. So they never make it lateral into the stream. So we did have a big effect on the carbon flux into the system. It opened up the stream channel. The algae can grow where there's light, but the leaves aren't making it in. And then this annually burned watershed had a young forest in it, so it kind of fell in between that these trees made. But you know, sort of big. And then the other thing we did is we surveyed the mosses. So we do see some shift of mosses in streams. Mosses in many places don't like full light desiccation, right? So when we opened up the canopy and into, we went from 5% moss cover to less than 1% moss cover. And the control where the woody vegetation is actually increasing all the canopy, the more cover, the moss cover went up. So we're seeing the cascading effect of the right. Okay, so this is just a really kind of a weird experiment that I'm throwing in here. Well, cutting everything for 2 years and not having it work is kind of routine. But in this one we went to the streams, and this was an experiment from the Atlantic Rainforest Institute, Sehadi. And we were looking at the primary production in the stream, and then if it cascades to macrosystem. When we threw oxygen probes in the stream here, we see this diurnal trend in oxygen, right? And this is what we use as stream ecologists to estimate the amount of primary production in the stream. Because when light's out and the algae are pumping out oxygen, then the oxygen comes up, the lights go out, the respiration continues, it drops the oxygen back down. You know, back in the 50s came up with this idea that we translated it to many streams now. But we're looking at this and going, you know, this is a closed canopy. What is going on here? How can there be algal photosynthesis pumping oxygen? And we wanted to prove that it wasn't photosynthesis. So we took 100 meters of stream channel and put black plastic over it. Right? And that's this gray part here. And this is above when we put the black plastic on, and this is below when we put the black plastic on. And we see that this diurnal trend just keeps going, right? We just get this up and down and up and down. And what we think is happening here, the best solution is that this is a right-setting canopy effect. What happens is, in the morning, when the sun first starts, the trees open their stomates, right? And they start pumping water up into the canopy, away from groundwater, away from the stream. So that anoxic groundwater is moving up into the tree trunk. And then, when by about noon, the sun is intense enough that the trees don't want to be losing everything, and they shut their stomates down, right? So the pump stops. And at that point, the groundwater can get back into the stream, more groundwater and off into the stream, and get the oxygen drop. And that's what we explain that particular thing. The point being that the type of vegetation on the outside of the stream can have reciprocal effect on the biodiversity of the stream and interact with hydrology itself. The plastic did get put to use because there was a fluid downstream of this that had nocturnal animal exhibits. So they would use it to make it night during the day and turn the lights on at night. So the people that came to see the animals and that's less than sun. So sorry for that. Okay, so just thinking and taking a step back, what might make prediction with the biome be of riparian function difficult? Slopes and soil types is going to be a big part of it, right? Those don't follow biomes necessarily. They can to a degree. I mean, there's certain areas, montane systems, for example, tend to have higher slopes, but usually geology is not. It interacts with it. It can interact with biome, but it's not going to drive biome for this part. Riparian zones may require unique adaptations. So flood resistance and continuous anoxia. So these are things that are going to be selective pressures that might make it so that we have completely different vegetation that occurs in riparian zones than any next part of biome. And then the last one, anthropogenic pressures may override most everything else. So we have, you know, I showed early examples of urbanization in Brazil and crop production in the Midwest had a really large effects that didn't matter so much didn't matter so much what the riparian zone was in those cases, it was really dry. So I think we can fairly confidently say that riparian zones function different depending upon biomes, and particularly bare soil versus grass, just have a lot of physical effects, and those you can imagine those will cascade to animal communities that are associated, insect communities, bird communities, all those things. So from that point of view, I think that there is room for macrosystem view of riparian zone form and function, and it's related to climate. The presence of large ungulate grazers can alter stream system function and will interact with riparian tree, particularly cattle, which are escaping the summer heat, like get down on the water to be in the shade, and they'll wait for cools off and go eat the grass. But they'll bring stuff in, and you can imagine things like this might interact with other large ungulate grazers. You know, there's work on the hippopotamus in Africa and those types of things. And then riparian zone conversion under global change can have strong effect on the system. So this idea of increased carbon dioxide is probably what's driving the riparian zone growth in campus, because the C3 plants don't have the disadvantage of having to keep their stormages open and use too much water. So the C4 plants lose their competitive ability. In this case, the grasses don't have the competitive ability over the trees and shrubs that require a little bit more water to feel that increased value. And that this is an example, I think, of we have these ideas of alternative stable states, right? But this is not quite that, because what we have is this trajectory, an alternative stable trajectory, if you will, of the forest and riparian zones going this way. We burn every 2 years and we cut every 2 years. We knock it off a little bit and just offset that or with that. So once again, humans are a huge impact on the ecology of the whole. And I think I don't know we're having time, but I'm happy.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know if that's the way people on the team hear a question.
I'll just repeat it.
Yeah, maybe Walter, you just don't want to question.
And if you want, I can pop chat.